Come back to your seats, please, as we kick off for session 3. Improving soil health and function. So please come and grab your seats. Got another great lineup of speakers. This session is about improving soil health. We'll hear from farmers and scientists, and we'll hear more about Whenua Amano. Did I get it right? Yeah. Hey, look at that. Please grab a seat. We will kick off in a second with our first speaker, Mark Lambert. Over to you, Mark. That's right. So Tom, like the president.
Okay, so I'm Mark Lambert from Sunnyside, Tasmania. How you all doing? Really good. Next slide, please. I'm doing it the easy way so that I don't have to press the wrong button. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to find a good map. Next one, please. So we're at the Sunnyside there, about directly inland from Devonport, 30 minutes near our little town called Sunnyside. It's the most notable town near Sheffield, the most notable town close to us. And the next one. So I've been running the farm since I was 18, and 28 years later, we're still on the same farm, but it's about 4 times the size. We're 300 metres above sea level, with a rainfall of about 1,000 millimetres on red soil, red volcanic soil, with plenty of rocks. We started in moderate depth with 75 cows. We now milk 570 cows organically, grain-free with 0 bought-in feed and moderate debt levels. People have mentioned about maximising on-farm feed use. Well, that's all we use. The next slide. Previously, our farming style was 800 kilograms of grain a cow, 180 kilos of N. We used the cheapest form of fertiliser that we could find. We grazed we were ryegrass focused and grazed at the 3-leaf stage. We conserved surplus pasture as high quality silage. Multi-species to us was 3 different types of ryegrass. We then spread the whole farm for weeds every year, and I sure was glad there was a drug or chemical for everything, because I sure seem to need a lot of them. Next. My journey into regenerative farming started with recognising I had a problem. Why wouldn't my farm grow clover? Planting it didn't seem to help. And if the clover did grow, it all got eaten by lucerne flea. Why were my cows getting an even dying from milk fever and grass tetany during the milking season? The ground was hard, the soil barren, except for ryegrass. And why do they have to apply so much nitrogen when the air is 78% nitrogen? I asked questions of agronomists, the DPI and reps. They all recommended putting more on of this, more on of that, more on, more on, more on. I started to wonder whether they were calling me names. Next. So I began, that's different. Let's split into 2, is it? Okay. So I began doing my own research and came across the work of Kerry Reams and William Albrecht, demonstrating the base percentages of cations in a good soil, and I compared these to my soil tests. I could see some startling inconsistencies with what I was being told. And the next one. They did some amazing work back in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, but their work was largely ignored by government at the time, with Kerry Reams even jailed for his approach to soil and human health. Those were the days when NPK fertilisers and monocultures began to dominate the farming landscape, and they worked well for a time, but slowly they began to degrade the landscape and the soil, and that is what I was seeing on my farm. Next. I I also came across the published work of Barry Rowe from Elliott Research Station on very similar soil to mine. These are volcanic soils with a heavy clay content that act like a loam. They've got a high exchange capacity in the high 20s and have issues with aluminium and iron and manganese that become toxic even at moderate pHs. So back to Barry, he put on 15 tonnes of lime a hectare over 8 years, starting with a pH of 5.5 in water, and recorded the changes over the years. Barry recorded how as the pH increased above 6.3, the pasture went from almost claver-free to claver-abundant, like you see on the two different halves of that picture there. The grasses became more persistent and the pasture grew on average 7.5% more dry matter than the control, with this extra growth being outside of the spring flush. The soil softened and the aggregation improved and infiltration rates increased. And the effects of the lime lasted throughout the 18 years of the active trial work and can still be seen years later. Now this work was done, this is on where James is talking about, this is now underneath the farmer trials. That very picture. Next, please. I discovered a lot of things during that time, like the availability of phosphorus and what it binds to at different pHs, how all the beneficial soil nutrients are most available at 6.6 in water, how the aluminium becomes less toxic as the soil pH changes, even though it is not removed from the soil, and what pH soil biology prefers. Earthworm is one of the best soil health indicators. Next, thank you. Check out this study on the suppression of microbial activity by a combination of low soil pH and high aluminium and iron. It's articles like these that gave me the confidence to start to do things differently. We stopped using the most damaging conventional fertilisers on soil life, particularly urea, DAP and potash, and replace them with sulfated forms of fertilisers whilst reducing their quantity. And with the same fertiliser budget, we started to apply large amounts of lime and dolomite. Next, thanks. Within a year of the first application of lime and dolomite, milk fever and grass tetany reduced and now only showed up at calving time. And over the years, cockchafers and hobby grubs were no longer a problem. And some weeds like cakeweed and ragwort, which is what's in this picture for those who don't know, they decreased markedly. The soil softened and water infiltration rates improved, and white clover started coming back into the farm. It was about this time that I declared, root clover doesn't grow on my farm, we don't even bother planting it. The seeds must have been germinating as I spoke, because the next thing I know, they're popping up everywhere. The soil started to come back to life. I know, thanks to the work of Christine James, that some soils will self-correct their pH with multi-species and rotational grazing. But, as Joel Williams says, other soils need a bit of a kickstart with the lime or dolomite. My soil is definitely one of those. Next, thank you. In late 2016, we decided to go organic farming. We've been down the biological farming approach, as it was known at the time, to a point where it didn't seem much of a big step. But so on went the phosphate rock, and we dropped the last 40 kilos of N, and we watched that pasture turn yellow. And we thought, well, what have we done? This is never going to work. It took a few months for the soil biology to kick in and the pasture to regain its colour. We also changed to spot spraying plant acids on all those weeds, and we stopped using antibiotics in dry cow and amine, what cell count issues we had after that. But to cut a long story short, that problem turned out to be contaminated drinking water. Now, if you want to find out what those drugs and chemicals are masking, just try going organic. It's a good educational experience. We experimented with getting biology out on the farm and sprayed microbial teas and seaweed and seawater and fish emulsions around the farm. But I've learned that it had always been in pasture. I saw no results. But we bought an ex-cropping farm next door, and the soil test showed some remarkably good numbers, but it just wouldn't grow. And so we put that brew on there, and you could see the change within a week. It was just incredible. Next, thank you. Well, a couple of years later, I got seriously sick with mould. I could barely work for 3 years. I'll tell you what, that really sorts out your priorities. You realise a lot of what you're doing is just chasing after the wind. Fertiliser? No, I didn't even have the effort in me to organise it. Weed spraying? Look, if the cows eat it, it's a herd. If they don't, it's a weed. Staffing issues? Well, goodbye twice a day, hello once a day milking. Milk cell count? Well, now, that's one thing the milk factories just wouldn't let me not give a damn about. 110 cold cows in 1 year to keep the cell count tolerable, that was hard. Now, it won't take a genius to realise that suddenly I had way too much grass, even with, say, a few fertiliser inputs. But looking back, it was during this time that we really took regenerative farming into our stride. And the changes we've made in the years since then have seen us become more profitable with less risk. Next, thank you. So on a friend's place on a mostly dryland farm, we saw how he was doing standing hay and feeding it off like a fodder crop in strips to the milking cows through the summer months. So back home, we'd leave a few paddocks for standing hay for the bulls, dry cows and heifers. These days that amounts to about 25% of our hay production as standing hay, and we give different paddocks a rest doing it that way each year. The rotation length on this style gets out to about 200 days. That's from late spring to early winter. We strip graze the long pasture down, quite hard with the dry cows, or not so hard with the dairy heifers, followed by topping the paddock. By the way, those photos are about 2 weeks ago at home. Standing hay allows the plants to reseed and the pasture grows extra well in subsequent years. But we find if we go longer than 200 days, we start to get some pasture decomposition. Even longer and the clover and herbs disappear, it just becomes like a roadside grass after that. And going into winter, over the whole farm, the grazing rotation actually speeds up to 100 days as we head into spring calving. If we go any longer than that, the pasture starts to get slimy. Next, thanks. Did I miss a slide? No, that's right. We also, this is on the irrigated part with the milking cows here now. We pushed out the grazing rotation for those cows on the irrigated land as long as we could, roughly the equivalent of the 4 to 4.5 leaf stage in ryegrass. And the cows are vastly more settled and production didn't drop with the longer pasture, only with the once a day milking. Now we have a longer reaction time to any feed pinches, and we feed out way less hay and silage. There's a lot less weeds, except for where we damage the soil in wet weather. And the red clover and chicory, well, with these changes, now they are growing like weeds. Next. We resowed as many paddocks as we could spare on the farm to perennial multi-species, including short-lived species that self-replace in the pasture sward. We do perennials as our farm is very stony. And now we commonly see clover and herbs dominating the pasture sward, and have seen a large increase in bird life and insect life. And the flowers have become a large part of the landscape. The cows love the multi-species and seek out their favourite foods. The bees produce more honey with the clover in flower for an extra few weeks before it gets grazed, plus the flowering multi-species. And the dryland pasture grows longer into the summer months. Next. We put in another centre pivot during this time to save on labour, but with a higher amount of pasture cover, the multi-species and less grazing in a year, my pivot circles are getting way too wet, and I have to reduce the hours the pivot runs. Now these hours of run time in the summer have been fine-tuned from previous years' experience, so we realise we can irrigate about 15% more ground grazing and growing grass this way. Looks like there might be another centre pivot going in yet. Next. People have asked, why don't you put on compost or worm juice? I say, my whole farm is now a compost layer, a worm farm and a dairy farm. With a higher pasture coverage, the multi-species, less grazing frequency, and higher grazing residual, I can barely see the soil now after grazing. It's covered in plants or old plant matter, and yes, we do top the paddocks once or twice a year. You dig into the soil now and it's just alive with worms. I mean, we cut more in half these days than we ever saw alive beforehand. Even with so little fertiliser used these days, the farmers growing pasture better than ever, with the worst paddocks vastly more productive and the best paddocks, while still the best, still growing just as well. Next. I remember the way we used to farm and some of the things we used to do. Sometimes I wonder, am I still a dairy farmer? As we do things so differently now. But I've noticed some of the things that I've been doing have begun popping up on other farms. And there are plenty of people out there wondering, what's Mark up to now? Well, that is a story for another day. Thank you.
I don't think you could have picked two more farmers that are similar in a lot of their approaches and journeys as Mark and I over the last 5-6 years, I guess. For those that weren't at our farm yesterday, we're down near Colac. We operate a regenerative and organic farm. We run about 1.4 to 1.6 head per hectare, and we run a flexible management, flexible grazing, flexible stocking, and now flexible milking regime. 2 years ago we milked, we spent the whole season milking 3 and 2, which for those that don't know, that's 2 times one day, once the next. We did that for the whole year, and then the last 12 months we went back to twice a day just because of the tough season, and it was a chance to get more grain to the cows and just a bit better management, I guess. On reflection, I'll never milk twice a day again. It's a lot better for our management staff. We've only got one staff member. We have a lot less issues with herd health. We have better milk solids production, and there's a whole heap of other benefits. One of the things I've noticed over the last few years, the biodiversity has been the most important factor to improving our soil function. We've achieved this by replacing ryegrass dominant pastures with annual and perennial multi-species. Pastures that include mixes of legumes, herbs and grasses. The results for the soil: we've seen an improved soil structure and a lot better soil aggregation, a lot higher air infiltration. We get a lot more water infiltration, faster infiltration. We have an increased organic matter. We have better water holding capacity, and that extends the season on the shoulder. So we get better growth into summer, and then we get a better rebound in the autumn when we get those autumn rains. We've also seen reduced erosion during winter with less pugging. So one of the benefits of the multi-species is we're able to drop, compared to a ryegrass paddock, we're able to carry the stock better just because of the better root structure. A lot of the ryegrass tends to be very narrow, very shallow depth, and we find with especially things like fescue and cocksfoot and the herbs, we've got a lot better root matter to carry the cows, and that's been probably a big benefit in the winter. We've also seen less erosion during summer because we carry higher covers, so we're not getting. I came down to Warrnambool a couple of weeks ago to see the accountant, and I come along the highway and there was a farm there and they had dry cows, and the dry cows were walking across the paddock, and with every footprint there was a little puff of dust come up. We don't see that, and I think if you really try and look after the soil, it'll look after us. And the other thing, this is probably something that a lot of people have a little bit of difficulty getting their head around. With the higher covers and the multi-species, we're able to keep the soil cooler during summer months. So we get less evaporation, and we also, it gives us a chance when we do get, we might get a summer rain, you get a lot of regrowth because you're not losing that to evaporation. And also, if we can keep the soil temperature, and I've seen it up to 10 degrees lower than one of the neighbours. I snuck over the fence and did a measurement of his soil. There was 10 degrees Celsius different in the soil temperature. And at a certain temperature, I can't remember what it is, but at a certain temperature, the biology starts to die. So we want to avoid that. So we move on to the results for the plants. So we've eliminated synthetic fertilisers. My opinion is that synthetic nitrogen destroys the relationship between the plant and biology. Muriated potash is, as they said before, it's 45 to 47% chlorine. Great for swimming pools if you want to kill the bugs. Plants, with multi-species, what we found is, and research shows, plants form a relationship with the biology. They provide exudates in exchange for nutrients. And I think my feeling is on our farm, when we were using high rates, and we got up to 200 kilos of nitrogen a hectare for a period of about 4 or 5 years. So the history of our farm is, the family's been there since 1939. It was all native bush. A lot of it was cleared by my grandfather and father. And they were traditionally potato growers, and they milked a few cows. That's how they sort of started out. And what progressed there was we used to use a lot of super and potash and very little nitrogen up until about 10 years ago. And I for better or worse, I put my hand up to be a focus farm, and that was a good experience because we really pushed the envelope, and we probably implemented a nitrogen regime similar to most people, and we got up to 200 kilos of nitrogen, and on a dry land farm that's fairly heavy. But what I noticed over 4 or 5 years, with the responses we got diminished, and that was a bit of a concern. So, we've probably gone full circle. We've been conventional. We've been, put through the ringer a little bit with the Focus Farm project, and we achieved, pretty good results. We were getting low cost of feed. We're under $3 under $3 a kilo milk solids for our cost of feed, which is pretty good. And we were hitting benchmarks, but something wasn't adding up. There was a year, I don't want to speak ill of Linda because she's not here, but there's a year where prior to going organic, we worked the whole year, and my tax return showed $57 profit. And at that point, Linda said to me, "I'm done. You'll have to do it by yourself." So I thought, let's go down this path. She got a job off farm. She still works off farm. She runs her own business, but she still supports what we're doing. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, because now she can see. We talked about maybe exiting the industry in the next couple of years. Now she sees how we're going and the results we're getting. She said, "Oh, maybe you should just stick at it a few more, just to keep that money rolling." So it's been a big journey, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat, where it's a tough season. Now we'll get off track here. We'll get back onto it. So with the healthier plants, and I've been tracking bricks levels for 20 years. I had a bricks meter 20 years ago. We did a little bit of work with Lorico out of South Australia, and they put me onto using the bricks meter. And we never saw bricks levels in the ryegrass over 3%. And for those that don't know, bricks levels go from roughly 0 to high 20s, 27, I think. So what we see now, and when we went organic, the wheels fell off. The wheels fell off for nearly 2 years, or say 18 months. But I took the view that we went cold turkey, and I thought the money that I was spending, which was over $100,000 on urea and other synthetics, if I put that into supplements, that would bridge the gap for that 1 year or 2 years, and it did. So we went cold turkey, we suffered a bit, but we got through it. What we see now is, we're seeing grips that have gone from 3, which things like lucent flea, red-legged spiders, all that type of insects, they love to consume low grip level plants. So we're seeing an average now of 12 to 15. So we've done away with, and being organic, we can't spray. We've done away with having to use herbicides, insecticides, and on the herbicides, I saw it, a thing on 4 Corners, I think it was, about paraquat. My father used to spray paraquat, and he's suffering now because of that. He's got no feeling in his hands, and I just look back at it and think why people use that sort of thing. I know they didn't know, but you know, now we know what the ramifications of those sort of inputs are. And the other thing I come across was, and I've watched a lot of, I do a lot of research on YouTube, probably the source of a lot of knowledge and ideas. But, and I think Mark touched on it, Christine Jones, one of the things that a lot of people talk about is when you grow a multi-species pasture, you get the Darwin effect. And the Darwin effect is that each plant will grow more than it would on itself. And that's been proven by research in Germany at the Jena experiment. So it's all readily available, this information, but the Jena experiment is the German Centre for Integrative Biodiversity Research. They've been studying for 20 years. They have 150 experimental plots with different combinations of grasslands and grassland plants. And they have plots with 1 species, 2 species, 4, 8 and 16. And the results show, and this is data that's been going for 20 years, the results show that 4 or more species will produce more biomass with no added nitrogen than 1 or 2 species with 200 kilos of nitrogen. The other big impact, and I put it down to our whole system, so that the whole system, it kind of feeds into itself. We have a lot less cost and a lot less stress. Being organic, we're allowed to use antibiotics and drenches on young stock. We do drench our dairy calves after weaning once, and that's it, they're never drenched again. So that our calves, you know, we can hit joining weights at 15 months. We can hit joining weights, they fed on milk for 12 to 14 weeks, we feed them a bit longer. Our milk is different, I consider our milk's different to other milk. Our milk's got it's around 4% protein and high 5s fat. The milk factory said I've got the highest solids non-fat going into the factory. So the calves, you know, we don't have to fortify the milk with milk powder, they're getting a higher quality feed. We do feed a little bit of grain to the calves, but once they're weaned, they're on multi-species, and I haven't fed any young stock any hay or bought-in hay or homegrown hay this year at all, and I'm still not feeding them. And we got through until the 1st or the 2nd of March this year, and the only reason we're feeding hay is to dry cows calving, just to get them off the grass. We've had a couple of cows with milk feed because they've been on what we call standing hay, so we do a lot of standing hay. We grow the herbs out, we grow the grasses out, and we'll go and flog them out in summer just to reset for the autumn. It cleans them up, it saves a lot of time and work. My employee, she's really good. She refuses to drive a tractor and operate machinery. For January, we've got a holiday house, we try and get down to the holiday house at Polar Bay as much as I can. I don't want to have to run back and feed cattle. So that takes a lot of work out of the system. We do feed a little bit of board-in hay this time of year. We've still got cows on summer crop. We've still got about 16 hectares of summer crop to go. This year's been, summer crops aren't as good. With our annual summer crops, we can grow up to 17, 18 tonne a hectare dry matter on a normal year. This year they were sitting around 8 to 10 tonne. Lost my spot. The other thing was, the other thing, we don't vaccinate. We don't vaccinate calves for 7-1 or anything like that. One of the big things with the milking cows is reduced lameness. And our farm, you wouldn't have seen, but where we walk down the lane, our farm is one paddock each side that wide. And the dairy's in the middle. We've got 8 kilometres of gravel laneway, and it's nearly 4 k's to each end of the farm. So, and this is the other reason for going flexible milking. We used to have a lot of cows with lameness. We have very little lameness. The other thing too is, and a lot of people say, oh, you can't feed multi-species because, calves will get pink eye and that sort of thing. Better hurry up. So the cows are more relaxed in dairy. We have a higher fat test. We've maintained production, and there's just a couple of things I want to finish off on. One very significant person in my life said to me, it's all about profit, it's never about production. Just one of the things I'm lucky with, I've been in the Dairy Farm Monitor project for 12 years. So I've got figures going back for 12 years on our production. And just a couple of snapshots out of that. Our physical data, our stocking rate is 70% live weight per hectare of the average of the southwest. Our homegrown feed that we consume was 5 tonne a hectare. The average of the southwest was 5.1. We grazed 3.9 tonne per cow. The average grazed 2.3. So that's a big difference. Our homegrown feed cost is $79 a tonne. The average is $161 a tonne. Our milk solid, and you get a bit of blowback from some people saying, oh, flexible milk and you're not milking many cows, you know it easy. Our milk solids per labour unit is 64,000 kilos versus 56,000 kilos, and we do similar litres per labour unit. So we're batting above our weight there. Profit per farm, we had a total income of $11.26, and this is last year's figures. The average of the southwest was $10.47. That's including stock milk price. Our feed costs were $3.36. The average was $4.24. And I look back through the figures, I did $2.41 for feed costs 2 years ago at 280 cows. I'm ramping back up to 280 cows this year. Our EBIT, our earnings before interest and tax, was $4.71, which makes us the second most profitable farm per cow in the southwest. The average was half that at $2.40. Our net income in last year was $3. The average southwest farm was $1.50. This year, their milk price is down over $1. I will maintain $3 this year. A lot of those guys will battle to make 55 cents. Where to now? Business as usual. Our milk price is going up. Our costs have stayed the same. I think I can drop our costs, and I think I can get probably $6 a kilo. My goal is $6 a kilo milk solids profit. So that's a big turnaround. We're making 6 figures. That's a big turnaround from 50-something dollars.
So I'm going to talk about some work that we've done on some farms across Victoria. So those of you who were out at Simon's yesterday would have heard me introduce it, but I will introduce it again for those who didn't. So I'm speaking here, but there is a team behind us. So we have a group who has speciality in pasture ecology, soil microbiology and economics as well, and a team of hard workers. So down in this area, Graham Ward, who's sitting in the middle, I know many of you know that, has been working very hard doing lots of our measurements. And I'd just like to thank Brian Schuller and Karanjit Singh Mali and Simon Scott for letting us do the work on their farms. So I'm going to talk about a project that's actually just finished. It finished in June last year, and it was funded by the Future Drought Fund Drought Resilient Soils and Landscapes program. And it was a couple of years of work. And the aim of this study was to think about, could we have a new technology that will be drought resilient, that we can upscale to the catchment level? So it was about demonstration, and that's how we ended up being out on commercial farms to do this work. It was funded by the federal government, as I said, and also Dairy Australia contributed some money to this, and we had some catchment management authorities involved in helping us to disseminate some of the information from it. So we had 11 farms across 3 regions, and all those little dots indicate the farms. We had 3 sites up in northeast Victoria. We had 5 sites actually down in Gippsland, and then a couple of sites over in this part of in the Western District. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about some of our findings generally, and then look at what the findings from Simon's farm, because we went and visited Simon's farm yesterday. And some of these, the idea behind these was that we wanted, with the commercial farms, we were looking for farms where people were growing both ryegrass and multi-species pastures, and we wanted those multi-species pastures to have been in for some time, ideally 10 years, because that's when you'd start to see carbon and nitrogen changes, but as you're all aware, it's a new area that people are working in. So one of our oldest farms was Brian and Karanjit's, that had been in for, I think, about 8 years when we got there to do the work, but a lot of the others were only a short number of years, 3 or so years old. So the experimental design, as I mentioned, it was on commercial farm. We used a paired paddock approach, which is a common approach when you're looking at ecological systems. So instead of running small plot trials, which scientists often like to run, we said, okay, we'll have one area that's multi-species pastures, one area that's ryegrass pastures. The size of that area that we've chosen is enough that we can get variation, that we can account for differences within that. So within each of those paired paddocks, we'd split it up into 4 quadrants, so we had a sort of pseudo-replication occurring, so we could look at some statistics on this. We followed farmer management, so we wanted to not impose on the farmer. As I mentioned yesterday, we followed what the farmer did, so we followed their grazing rotation. We had exclusion cages out, and we would come in and cut the grass after the cows had grazed each of that site. We did start a few of our farms where people would graze the ryegrass and the multi-species differently, which was kind of what we thought would happen, because often the multi-species is grazed longer. But because everyone is so helpful, because we had staff driving all over the place, most of the farms ended up doing their grazing of the multi-species and the ryegrass sites on the same rotation in the end. We measured a number of different things. So pasture production, we looked at pasture quality, and we considered the pasture composition over time. We took deep cores at various stages of the project and looked at carbon and nitrogen. We also took samples for soil microbiology from different depths of those deep cores. And we measured real-time soil moisture dynamics. So we put in capacitance probes, which I showed some of you yesterday, which sit in the ground to about 80 centimetres depth, and they're logging moisture and temperature every 10 centimetres depth. So if we think about the results, so this is the results summarised for Victoria. So what we've done here is we've put in all the different regions, the different sites, the annual tonnes of dry matter per hectare for the ryegrass and the multi-species pastures, the annual rainfall for each of those regions, and the average annual minimum and maximum temperature. So those are from the local bureau stations, not actually on farms, so there may be a bit of variation there. So you can see there's a bit of variation in the rainfall across those different sites, and that sometimes, but not all the times, coincides with the production. So we can see that in the Goon Nurse site, which is in Gippsland near Bairnsdale, that was a very dry site, and we're seeing different outcomes from that site as well. And the Crossley site is also one of the dry ones. Barangaroo, where we were with Simons, is a dry site as well, but as we were talking about yesterday, because of its location on the south side, that hill it didn't seem to, it's grown much more productively. We did include a conventional or traditionally managed farm, so this is one where it's just ryegrass grown with lots of nitrogen inputs, because we thought that the industry may say to us, well, you're looking at these multi-species, but what is it compared to a traditional system? Because all the farms had converted to multi-species, the ryegrass was managed in the same way, so nitrogen inputs were dropped across the whole farm. So this external farm did have higher production. I haven't really got any data for any of the other metrics on that. Just, I guess that's something that we need to be aware of when we're thinking about the productivity that it's a whole different conversation. We had a couple of farms where we saw, so generally we're seeing more production from the multi-species pastures. There's a couple of farms where we didn't. So the farm at Tallandoon, this has got flooded in that 2022-2023 summer. So that had a big impact on the pastures. And the Burrong site is very dry. And that area is essentially going out of dairy, mostly. So the messages from here are that climate's a driver of production. Low inputs have reduced production, but that's, as people have talked about, it's not all about production, it can be about profit. So other factors will influence differences seen, so there may be other nutrient deficiencies as well. We have to look into that a bit more. So if you had the same inputs, then we say, it's about the same production if we look at it as an average. If we look specifically at Simon's farm here, so what these bars are showing, the blue bar is the average ryegrass production for each grazing cut. Orange is the multi-species, and then the line shows the daily production. And we put that in case there was differences in grazing rotations, which is mentioned in Art. So you can see here, if you look at the line, that it's fluctuating up and down, and those two lines are changing position. So we have better daily production of the multi-species at certain times of the year. Just going to get rid of those lines because they make it a little bit messy. So what we have found is that we are getting better production in the edges of the season. So in autumn, when it's a little bit drier, we find that we're getting greater production from these multi-species. And all these farms are rain-fed, so there's no irrigation going into them. We can also pick up a bit of a difference at the end of the season. So in October, we're getting greater production. And then in January through the summer, we got greater production. In November, they both produce quite the same on this site. I'm not 100% sure of that reason for that, but probably water related. So yeah, we can extend the edges of the season. So as has been mentioned, that means you don't have to get in feed at that time. We don't necessarily see a spring benefit because that's when ryegrass is doing really well. And aside from those edges of the season, the production is about the same. This is a picture of ryegrass and the multi-species at one of our Gippsland sites. So this was a high rainfall site, and that was taken in summer last year. And you can see in the picture on the right that there's those little green flecks going all across the paddock. So this is commonly what we see, is that the chicory is there and it's green once you're going in through the summer. This is what we see at Simon's place. This is also a photo from February. So ryegrass on the left, multi-species on the right. And you can see that there's a difference in how the ryegrass is managed at Simon's place. So the cover is always a lot higher than it is at the other farms that we've been investigating. So the reason that we get this chicory being able to come through is because it's got this deeper taproot. So if you consider the depth of the grass roots, which is very shallow, this taproot of the chicory enables it to access more moisture. If we look at the nutrient quality, so this is crude protein, and this is for all our sites, so we've averaged the farms across each location. Green is the multi-species and the pinky colour is the ryegrass. So we can see that generally the multi-species is performing better in terms of the crude protein content of the feed. There's a couple of times in winter and the summer where they're not, they're either the same or less than the ryegrass. But sometimes when the crude protein is more valuable because you would have had to buy in feed if you didn't have it there in your ryegrass, then that's when we're finding a benefit from the multi-species. So in that autumn period or the late parts of October, early parts of spring, late spring, sorry. I'm thinking, okay, so they're the, and this summer one also, this was when we had the flooding, so I think that affected the multi-species performance. And this one is in winter. At Barangaruk, we can see here the crude protein and metabolizable energy with the measurements. We did take a lot of other measurements like ash and fibre and organic matter, but they were all the same between them. So we can see here in these autumn months differences between the seasons, but we do see that the crude protein in the multi-species in that tougher season at the start is higher in multi-species. It's similar with the multi-species in the ryegrass in that other autumn time. And it's a little bit higher in some of these other seasons. So it's a bit hard to tell all the time what's going to happen. Yes, and the metabolizable energy is generally the same. Maintaining diversity, so we wanted to think about this. So this is a picture I've made that shows the diversity above the ground and below the ground. So we know that there's different shapes of the plants growing above the ground that compete with each other, and there's different shapes below the ground. And so that means that as you grow these species, it's possible that some of them will be favoured over others over time, and you'll get down to this few species remaining. We've done an assessment, so this is a visual assessment of the compositional diversity of the pastures over time, and this is at Simon's Place. So I just thought I'd put a line in here. So this is May of 2 years. And so you can see here that the perennial ryegrass, which is that big yellow one, gets more growth over that springtime and then drops off over the summer, starts to pick up again maybe later after April. After autumn, and then the other species, they're all changing over time because they've got a preference for growing in those different environments. So there is this constant change. We're seeing here generally the species are staying, particularly in Simon's Place, because of the way he manages that regeneration of the species over time. In the other farms across Victoria, we see a similar picture of this change over time. And these are systems that are not being oversown in Simon's Place. And the May production here in 2024 was less than that in 2023, so this is a percentage composition of the mix that's there, so not necessarily reflecting the biomass production at the time. If we look at soil moisture, so we had these probes in, and these probes are at 10 centimetres depth, as I pointed out before. So if you look, the solid lines at the top are 40 centimetres of the soil, and then the dashed lines up the top are the lower depths. And so if I compare this to the rainfall, then you can see that the soil moisture is increasing, as we have rainfall events occurring. So we get these spikes in soil moisture. You can particularly see that at this last one on the graph. And so that's what's filling up the soil profile over time. So this again is just looking at the different seasons there. This is the pattern that we get for the ryegrass. We get the most fluctuation in the top, so that's where this you get a combination, I guess, of plant uptake in that top part from the ryegrass, and also you can get evaporation from the soil surface if the ryegrass isn't full cover, but it is at Simon's Place. If we look at the multi-species versus the ryegrass, and with these probes we need to look at the pattern rather than the absolute value. I particularly wanted to point out this end bit here. So we can see that as we go into summer, the soil profile fills with water, and both profiles are quite wet throughout. We can see though that as we get to autumn, the moisture content of that deeper soil layer drops off more quickly in the multi-species than it does in the ryegrass. So this is an indication that the plants are able to access the water from depth during those times. And this, just to illustrate again, this is why that multi-species is drawing more water from depth, because the roots are down there. We looked, 4 seconds, sorry. We looked at carbon. So very quickly, carbon changes with depth. Carbon was different in different locations because of climate, but there was no difference between multi-species and ryegrass pastures. These systems are very high in carbon, so you can see in the Gippsland ones, it's around 4% carbon. We looked at total carbon, multi-species ryegrass, no difference. We looked at active carbon between them, no difference. We looked at nitrogen, no difference. We looked at potentially mineralisable nitrogen as a form that's cycling quickly, and there was no difference there either. When we looked at the soil biology, again, there was differences in the soil biology with depth. So this is looking at abundance of bacteria and fungi, and we can see there's more of that abundance in the topsoil and the subsoil, but we don't see any difference between the ryegrass and the multi-species. This is generally across Victoria. And again, looking at the diversity. So the greater the diversity, the kind of healthier the system could be considered. And we don't see any significant differences between the pasture species, but we do see some differences between the depths. So the key insights, we can get these benefits from multi-species. They're seasonally influenced. They can extend the growing season. That seems to be quite apparent from a number of our sites. They do have reduced end input, so there's reduced production. In terms of quality, crude protein can be higher at times when it could be considered more valuable. We don't see any evidence of soil carbon and nitrogen changes, but I think this is because dairy systems are high in carbon and nitrogen, and it takes a long time. Carbon changes are decade-long events to occur. And in soil health, both systems seem to be quite healthy because they're high in organic matter. So my take-home messages, we do see that there is some drought resilience from using these products, or these pastures. Maintaining that diversity is a challenge, and we need longer-term studies to do this. So I just wanted to point out that with Simon's farm and 2 of the other farms in Victoria, we will be continuing to monitor them agronomically in this Feed 365 Future Drought Fund long-term trials. So thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. And thank you particularly to Kath and Dairy Australia for inviting Danny and I over for this great event. And like Danny, I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of Peter Sale. I can't tell you how excited I was to see Peter yesterday. I haven't seen him probably since I finished my PhD. Peter was one of my supervisors. So it's really lovely to have all the mentors and influences in our lives here for this event. So I'm going to follow on from Danny's presentation, talking about particularly, so this is the Whenua Hamanu team, you can all practice saying that name, and following on particularly focusing on the soil health measures that we're doing as part of our project. So I'm going to talk about some of the methods that we're using and also just some of the results. I also wanted to highlight the team. So I look after the soil research component of our project, but there's a number of researchers that lead the individual streams. And I also wanted to acknowledge our budding soil scientist, much to Denny's dismay. This is Elsie, our daughter, she's 15, and already showing a great interest in soil science, which I'm rapt about.
She pretends to for her mum's sake.
Okay, so like Danny mentioned, Whenua is a really comprehensive program. We are measuring and monitoring pretty much everything above and below ground. So I'm going to be focusing particularly on the soil biology, the chemistry, the physics, and also some environmental measures that we're looking at. And so we've listed some of the key things that we're measuring here, and I think Danny went through those as well. So starting with soil carbon, for us this project is funded through the Ministry for Primary Industries. It's got a whole heap of industry partners. So for us, one of the really critical things is to look at soil carbon, looking at whether these systems within the 7-year research project is going to have an influence on soil carbon. So in year 1, we did a really extensive carbon survey, using deep cores down to 60 centimetres. And then this year, we're redoing that carbon sampling again, and we're all dreading it immensely because the last time we had to do at least 1,000 cores, and I think we're going to need to do more this time. So, yuck. Anyone wants to come and help us, you're welcome. But in terms of year 1, these are the data from the dairy farm. And so we've got carbon stocks in tonnes, it says megagrams, tonnes of carbon per hectare. And then you'll notice we've got A, Bs and Cs. One of the challenges of our project is we've got so many different people working on different aspects. They use different ways of describing the treatments, but A is the standard contemporary treatment, B is the diverse regenerative treatment, and C is the diverse contemporary treatment. But as Danny mentioned, he tried to gloss over the fact that we've got different soil types on the dairy farm, but this graph is a real testament to the fact that they are different in that we didn't see any differences in our background levels between treatments in carbon, but we certainly did see differences between soil types. So yeah, there you go, Danny. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what we find this year. On the sheep farm, we've got the same soil types, a lot more straightforward, and again, we saw no differences in our background levels, so we're really confident we're starting at a good base to be able to test this idea in terms of, do these management strategies have any impact on soil carbon? Soil fertility, I want to talk about the soil fertility data today. If anyone's interested, I can follow up. Basically, we're not seeing anything too exciting, but we are seeing a slight trend on the dairy farm in terms of increasing labile carbon. So we measure hot water extractable carbon, but really early days, so we want to see some more data before we are too confident about that. But we also use our soil fertility sampling. We sample every paddock every year, and we use it as a team bonding exercise, and these photos just show what fun we have. We start the day with a bit of a lesson on how to take really good soil samples, so we get good quality data. We all stop for lunch, the whole team's involved, and yeah, it's really quite a lot of fun. But you might also be interested in what we're measuring. So here's the list of the soil tests we're measuring. Pretty sort of stock standard, but we are also measuring total nitrogen, total phosphorus, because there is the regen farmers that we're working with often talk about the fact that with a deeper rooted species and more diverse pasture systems that we might be actually mining or tapping into some of that phosphorus and nitrogen that's previously unavailable to ryegrass white clover system. So we are tracking that. Soil biology. So we're looking at earthworms every year. We're looking at microarthropods every second year. So microarthropods are things in the soil, life in the soil that's visible to the naked eye, but too small to pick up. So imagine like mites and things like that you can see, but you can't really grab. And then we're also measuring above ground insects. Now this photo, we need to get a better photo, it doesn't do it justice, but basically this is all the insects, all the things that we saw on Simon's farm yesterday. We use a sucker blower vacuum to suck those guys up and then identify and measure them, and clearly not on a golf course looking grass like that, but within our multi-species. And this year we had some deferred pasture, pasture growth is high standing hay, I think is what you guys are calling it. And you can see the insects sort of just teeming. So we did some extra measurements on those particular managements, so it'd be really cool to see how those results look. But in terms of results, so in terms of earthworms, so in 2003, we found that the most abundant earthworm species that we see, A. calignosa, was significantly higher under our treatment, the diverse pasture treatment under regenerative management. And you can see that in the graph there. So the blue bar is the diverse regen treatment. Just to explain, I'll have a few of these box and whisker plots. Sorry, they're a bit scientific. But we didn't, because there's so many parts of this project, there wasn't time to get everyone to redo their graphs for me. But basically the line in the middle represents the median. And then the box represents half of the data, 50% of the data, and then the lines either side just sort of show the spread of data. So it is quite good just to show how variable some of these results are. But moving on, so 2023, in 2024 we didn't see any difference between earthworms, between the treatments. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we see in future years. We'll be measuring again this year in June. Mesofauna, so in 2023, in general, between the two farmlets, we found that the total mesofauna was higher under the sheep farmlet, but we didn't see any effect of treatment on the total mesofauna, but we did see that the class of other mesofauna, which includes mites and potworms. Now, I'm not an ecologist, so we might have to talk to Pauline if you've got any specific questions about these things. They were significantly higher under the diverse pasture and regen management. And in terms of the sheep farm, so no effect on total mesofauna, but we did find that the there's an Orobatia mites, which includes the microbiivores and the detritivores. They were actually higher under the standard pasture and contemporary management. So we'll be measuring this again this year, so it'll be interesting to see how things are looking. In terms of the ground arthropods, so these are the ones that we suck up with the lower back. So we found no treatment effect on the ground arthropods, on the dairy, and on the sheep farm, we found that the number of sucking herbivores, and they include things like aphids and thrips and mealybugs, they were higher under the standard pasture in general. And no effective treatment on the other predators or diphtheria. In terms of soil biology, we've got a really strong interest in soil biology, but we need to admit that we are finding it a little bit challenging. Some of these measurements aren't straightforward, and because we've got such a big project and so many samples, we are wanting to do these measurements in-house. So we've got a pretty extensive monitoring program looking at soil DNA. So Danny mentioned we're looking at DNA in the gut microbiome of the animal, but this is particularly looking at the soil microbiome, and we're really interested in that interaction too. So are the cows that are grazing on those farmlets, having any influence on the soil microbiome that we're measuring? But it takes a long time with soil DNA analysis. We're finding you take the samples and they get extracted and then they sort of take forever to get results back. So we actually only have results for the sheep farmlet from 2023, and so far we've found no difference in diversity. The fungi, fungi and bacteria, we've got a student looking at that, so he's done some samples in spring last year, and then we'll do a big sampling campaign in June, so I haven't really got any results to share on that yet. But another thing that we'll be looking at, we've been talking about indicators of soil health, so one of the things that the soil health experts in New Zealand often talk about is the importance of nematodes, and particularly that community structure of nematodes. So this is something that we will be measuring. We've just done a bit of training on nematode identification. And has anyone looked at a nematode under a microscope, just out of interest? How cool are they? They're amazing. Some of them have got like little horns and suckers, and they eat bacteria, and anyway, it's a whole world that you guys need to get into if you haven't already. One of the cool things about Massey is that we have a lot of interns, particularly French interns. They're always interested in doing little research projects. So I've just thrown this one in just for more for interest. We've been looking at just simple measures of microbial activity because microbial measurements can be quite quite expensive and difficult sometimes. So this student looked at the cotton strip assay method, and then we compared it with measurements in the lab with microbial activity. And this is something we've got a new crop of interns at the moment, so they're going to redo this study, but add some other measurements as well, looking at popsicle sticks and other really simple measures, just to see if we can use them as a guide or an indicator of microbial activity. In terms of soil physical measures, so yesterday Pauline looked at, you saw some slaking tests. We use a sort of similar modified method to look at aggregate stability. So we take a set 5 centimetre by 5 centimetre cube of soil, we dry it out, and then we put it in distilled water for 1 hour, and then look at the change or the amount of slaking that's happened on that sample. We're also measuring compaction, we're measuring bulk density, we're measuring infiltration, and then we've done some really detailed measurements on pore sizes. I didn't have any nice photos of that. One of the things we've noticed with infiltration, there's a lot of farmers measuring infiltration in New Zealand, but one of the things we notice is missing sometimes with those measurements is not allowing the soil to saturate before getting a reading, because you can get a lot of variability. If you've got quite a dry soil and you add water to do an infiltration test, if it's quite dry, that water will disappear really quickly. So we saturate our soils for up to 20 minutes, we let the water sit before we take our measurements, and I think it's quite important if we're wanting to look at changes over time. Visual soil assessment, so again, Pauline mentioned some of this yesterday, so we use the method that Graham Shepherd developed. So Graham Shepherd is based, or was based at Landcare Research in Palmerston North, and a lot of this work has come out of really long-term and really detailed research on cropping systems, so looking at the effect of long-term cropping on changes in soil air spaces, soil porosity, bulk density, nutrient holding capacity. So stuff that's really relevant to what we've been talking about the last few days. It is a subjective measurement though, so you basically dig a spade square, so you can see the hole there on the screen. We drop the soil from a certain height, we let it break up, we look at the structure. Actually, before we do that, I have a look at the soil face itself, so that next photo. Looking at the pore spaces and making an assessment of the porosity. And because it is subjective, I do these measurements every year just so that there's no sort of operator error, because someone else will definitely rank it differently to what I would. So that's the way we're trying to standardise things. I've just also threw in these next two photos. Pauline yesterday talked about these riser sheaths or Rastafarian roots is another way people talk about it. And yeah, we just happen to have some really cool photos, which I thought would be cool to share. So in terms of some results from the visual soil assessment, so last year, this is the soil porosity score, so it ranges from 0 to 2.5, or to 2, sorry, I think it's a high score. Not a huge amount of difference, so remember that line in the middle of the box is the median value. Perhaps on the sheep farm we are seeing a slight trend for increased soil porosity under the diverse pasture treatment, but again, we'd really like to see some more data before we were confident about that. In terms of, so I'm going to talk about soil infiltration, but before I do, I'd also mention that I'm not showing bulk density data, but we haven't seen any significant differences. So from a scientific term, significance is important to feel confident about those results. You can see trends, but often we're unlikely to talk about results unless they are significant. So bulk density, we haven't seen anything significant there. With the infiltration capacity, we are seeing soil type differences again, Danny. So we're seeing slightly higher infiltration rates on the Manawatu sandy loam. And we are seeing a bit of a trend for increased infiltration under the diverse pasture treatment. But again, we really like to see some more data on that. If we look at the sheep farm, we've got the same soil type, but we're not seeing any differences in infiltration capacity. And that may be, Danny mentioned we had a really wet year, we had a really rough start on that particular farmlet, and it may be still recovering from there. In terms of nitrate leaching, so the environmental measures are a really important part of the study. So we're measuring nitrate leaching on both sites. On the dairy farm, because it's a free draining soil, it's really challenging to measure water going through the soil profile. So we've set up what's called trench lysimeters. So they're a technique that was developed down in Canterbury on the stony soils down there. Basically, it involves a long trench that's 10 metres long. There's a wick that's like a thick rope, which is placed in the bottom of the trench, surrounded by some gravel, and then the soil is backfilled in the layers that it was put in. And we allowed our site to settle for like a year before we used any results. So the results I'll talk about today are from 2023 onwards. On the sheep farm, this other photo, we have heavier soils. They're subsurface drained using mole and tile. And so that's a really cool opportunity because we can direct that water from the subsurface out through, so those white pipes are coming from the paddock. And we can direct, so we can drain individual paddocks and we can direct that water through a tipping bucket so that the grey bucket underneath the black bins fills with water on one side, tips, and we know how much water we're collecting, so what's the volume of drainage that's coming out of that soil. And for every tip, we get a sample, so we can measure the nutrient concentration. So here are some of the results. So in terms of the, oops, I haven't labelled these. Sorry, the first one is 2023 and the second one is 2024. Apologies for that. So this is data from the dairy farm. And so these graphs show what we call cumulative nitrate load. So I'm only mentioning nitrate because we hardly measured any phosphorus leaching. So it wasn't considered enough to even talk about, so which is a good thing. But so what we found, you can see here that in both years we measured higher nitrate loads on the diverse contemporary treatment. But this is a challenge of science. What we discovered in the analysis of these data is that 2 of the lysimeters in that study weren't functioning all that well, and we were measuring much higher nitrate concentrations than we would expect. So we don't have any or much confidence in those green lines, but the other 2 treatments are functioning really well. And what that translates to, so you can see I've greyed out the diverse contemporary treatment there because I really want you to understand that until we get some more data on that, we're not confident in those results. But we did find significantly lower nitrate loads coming out of the diverse regen treatment in 2024. So lower loads in 2023 as well, but not statistically significant, but it was significant in 2024. And on the sheep farm, these were analysed slightly differently, analysed in terms of standard pasture and diverse, and we did see significantly lower nitrate loads from the diverse pasture. And I've only got 2023 data for this particular site. And finally, nitrous oxide emissions. So we measured those in 2023. We've done a second round of nitrous oxide measurements, and it would have been great to present them today, but they weren't ready. But what we did find in 2023 was that under standard pastures and contemporary management, they were at least 65%, nitrous oxide emissions were at least 65% higher under the standard pastures and contemporary management compared to the diverse pastures, regardless of management. So that's an early day finding, but really interesting, and we really are hanging out to see the second lot of results just to confirm if that's right. And I just want to finish just to say one of the coolest things about this project is working with so many different students. In the middle here is a teacher from Fielding Intermediate that came and did an exchange with us for 6 months. The guy on the left is on a sabbatical. The other guy is an undergraduate student. And so it's a really cool opportunity to get these guys involved in research and really get them enthused about farm systems and measuring and monitoring and learning some new skills. So cool. Thank you very much.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic, jam-packed session again. You guys know the format. Our speakers will be up on stage, and this time Kath Leskin will facilitate the discussion. So, have your questions ready, please.
Is it on? Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I reckon that was a fantastic session as well. We've originally, Mark and Simon giving us a really good rundown on what their changes to their farm have been, and the observations that they've made in terms of their soil health and the improvement that they've observed in their soil health and function, looking at the animal health as well. And, I think they both highlighted that it wasn't actually smooth sailing. So the transition from that traditional system to multi-species wasn't smooth sailing. And Helen provided the evidence that the work she's done through Victoria, looking at the difference in production of multi-species versus ryegrass, but also the soil properties and any changes that we've seen there. And luckily for us, that's ongoing through another project where she's running 3 of those sites continually now for another, is it 3 years, Helen? For another 3 years. So I think that's really fantastic that we've got some longer term research happening as well. And then what a way to finish off with Lucy talking about the Whenua Hamani project and all of what they're doing in the soils area. So the amount of measurements and monitoring that's happening there with the Whenua Hamani project, and how we will be able to relate that back to some of the work that we're doing in Australia as well. And I will highlight that with Danny and Lucy and the Whenua Hamani project, we've actually got a little bit of interlinkages with some of the projects in Australia. I'm going to stop because I'm sure there's lots of questions, but the work that is being done in New Zealand very well linked and aligned with some of the work in Australia. Questions?
Okay, one question here, Rodrigo from Dairy Australia. Great presentations, and my question is for Lucy. Lucy, how important is soil type in defining your soil fauna diversity and I guess amount? And are there any benchmarks that farmers could use to determine if their soil fauna is poor, average, or healthy?
Good question. Sorry, Kath. Yeah, so in terms of soil type, yes, it definitely has an impact. And so how we deal with that on the dairy farm is that we have intensively monitored transects just on 2 of the soil types. So we keep those separate, we analyse them separately, because yeah, we see some differences definitely. To answer your second question, I'm sort of hoping that Pauline might be able to help there. I don't know if she's here, because yeah, I'm not a soil ecologist. I'm not sure of benchmarks for farms in terms of where they should aim for. I don't know, Pauline, did you want to?
I haven't got much to add. I think that what we tend to use in Australia are averages that we see around the place when we do survey work, and I speak specifically about earthworms. So we know what to expect in certain areas. It's probably more related to climate, but we do know that earthworms don't like coarse sandy soil very much. So the benchmark, they're really comparisons, they're not benchmarks as such, but what I'd like to see developed are benchmarks according to the soil types, and I'm sure that data will come from the studies that you guys are doing.
Thanks Pauline. Thanks Lucy.
Hi, Alicia University. Sorry, question for Mark and Simon. Two-part question really. Wondering if you know what the percentage of the Australian dairy industry is that's currently organic, and I guess what you consider the biggest deterrent to people going organic? It seems like there's lots of advantages. I'm just wondering what the biggest deterrent there that you would consider.
Well, I don't know the total number of dairy farms in Tassie, but there's 9 organic dairy farms, so that's not very many. But the biggest deterrent is probably been price the last few years, because that price needs to be probably 20%, 25% differential to make it attractive. Once you're in the system, it's not too bad. But to bring people into it, it needs to be that bit higher, because they think that production will crash, and it does for a little time, but it recovers too.
In the southwest Victoria, I think there's I think it'll be less than 15 organic farmers. And one of the problems we've got, the farmers are generally very small, 80 to 150 cows, older farmers or a bit more alternative people, I guess. I think the second part was, is it hard to get into? Is it difficult? Or the barriers? I think the barrier is a lack of knowledge. I think just people don't understand what you can achieve, and there is alternatives to, you can use, don't use synthetic fertilisers, plenty of alternatives. Everything's got a replacement, and as far as antibiotics and medication, there's a lot of natural stuff that we can use, and it's quite successful.
And also on top of that, it's a free process to get into organics, so you need to be committed before you even start. You can't just dabble in it.
Oh, hi, Yvette Williams from Dairy Australia. Just a question for Helen. Interested in no difference between the nitrogen measures between the perennial ryegrass and multi-species plots. Just like, I can't remember if the fertiliser, was there a difference in fertiliser inputs between the two plots? And would you be, I suppose, any comment around, would you be expecting to see differences in the nitrogen measures between those two treatment plots or treatment areas?
So there were no, in terms of nitrogen management, it was the same for the multi-species and the ryegrass in those, all the comparison sites. The only one that was different was the Lilico site, and so we would expect that the multi-species would have more because it's got the legumes in it to bring that nitrogen in. So the idea with the multi-species is that it doesn't need fertiliser inputs because the legume is fixing the nitrogen to put into the system. I guess you have to think that dairy farms are very high in carbon and nitrogen, organic carbon and nitrogen, or total. So if you measure total carbon, it'll be about 4% in a topsoil. It could be 2.5 to 4% or something like that. So that's very high. And when we think about the nitrogen pool, 95% of the nitrogen is in that organic pool. So any changes of nitrogen fixation, they're not going to be seen for a while, and I guess changes in terms of nitrogen rundown that might occur with the ryegrass under less fertiliser also wouldn't be seen for a while.
Thanks, Helen.
Yes, Ellie Court from Soils for Life. I guess I have 2 questions. One was to Lucy about whether there are opportunities for farmers to visit your trial sites, and more broadly, the plan for sharing the results, and if you're already doing that, how's it going? And for Mark and Simon, talked a little bit about the barriers to organics, but we saw some of those financial figures earlier presented by some others around just the financial benefits of moving towards multi-species full stop, and I'd be interested in thoughts on getting organic certified or not getting organic certified if you're moving into this space.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, we welcome visitors to Whanau. So we have an open day every year that was being held in November, but we had 2 years of rain, so we are going to move that to February. So the next one will be February 2026, I think. So we have a newsletter. You can get signed up for that. If you're in New Zealand, let us know. It's nice if we can coordinate groups though, just so we're not doing it every week. But yeah, so we did have some stuff to, some brochures and things, but we left them in the hotel. So we'll bring them tomorrow. That'll have our contact details. So yeah, please hit us up tomorrow.
Can you repeat the second part?
Sorry for the double-barreled question. Thoughts on getting organic certified versus maybe just experimenting and going in this direction without necessarily needing to get organic certified, given that barrier of needing to fully commit and jump in to go down that road?
Yep. Well, I think
Especially in light of some of the financial results we saw earlier about the costs.
I think for both of us, we actually did not go down into this pathway to become organic. So we got down this pathway a certain way, and it's like, hang on a minute, we're doing this with virtually no nitrogen and reduced fertiliser inputs, and it's like, well, we may as well become organic, mightn't we? Because it's just there. But, well, this is for me. And so there's a bigger jump though. There's still that detriment in pasture growth from that. Financially though, like because you're dropping out urea almost completely, and reducing other fertilisers, any detriment to, like you said in your presentation, any detriment to income is offset by reduced costs.
I think money is a big stick, and there's a worldwide shortage of organic product. There's an Australian shortage of organic product. So what I'm being told from our milk company is that they'll take all they can get, and they're turning away customers that they can't supply. So our milk price this year is $10.50. Next year's a minimum. They're talking a minimum $11. There's no volatility in our price. It's only one way it's going up. So from that point of view, and I've got the numbers for 12 years, we're making more money producing about 100,000 kilos of milk solids as what we did doing 225,000 kilos. And life's a lot better.
But don't tell anybody.
Hi, question for the panel. There's just been a few comments about the use of urea and synthetic nitrogen. Why should we be considering dropping our use of this apart from reduced costs?
You can do without it. If you've got the right species and you've got the right management, you can grow as much feed, and I think that science proves you can grow as much feed without it. So why would you want to go and spend, in my case, 100,000 on urea if we can grow the same tonnage and probably get a better quality pasture mix than throwing away $100,000?
We have a fair few people come across our farm, and like a lot of them have commented, so how much nitrogen do you use? Because like it's green, like it's as green as any other dairy farm. And it's like, obviously there's none. Like, so again, why? Once you sort of get into this world, you just don't need to use it. Or very little.
So of the farms that we looked at, some people did keep using nitrogen, just usually a very reduced level. And I think originally dairy systems used to be ryegrass clover mixes, and then people put on more and more nitrogen to boost production. So the clover disappeared largely from a lot of those pasture systems. So if you're going in the multi-species pasture mix and you apply a lot of nitrogen, then that's going to upset that diversity mix. So to get the diversity, I guess that's benefiting from all those plants interacting again. I do work a lot with fertilisers. I'll put that out there now. So I don't necessarily see fertiliser as an evil thing, but it has been used a lot, and there are losses associated, particularly with nitrogen. But I think it has a place in some instances at the right appropriate rates.
Well, I'll just add one more to that, is the volatile prices of nitrogen, I think, is where some people will start to get into looking at, reducing nitrogen inputs on their farm just because of the volatile prices. So I think that's where a bit of this started from as well, quite a few years ago. Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, sure. Come back to you, Ely.
Sean Hilwitty Coppin. Question for Mark and Simon. How How long in persistence are you getting out of your multi-species before you have to go and do something else with them?
So we're on a study farm, so our aim is to never resow. So it's a bit like Gillian in Ireland, like it's just, don't go there.
We've got some paddocks where we treat them pretty badly, so we replace them maybe 5 to 7 years. But I've got other paddocks that mainly we use for young stock. The population is as good as what we put in, 10 years ago. So I guess it depends how you treat it.
And the other thing, so yeah, we don't go there and we don't actually aim to resow anything, but where there's pugging damage or anything like that, we'll spread just top dress seed over the top of that. And we just find it's spreading itself with the change in grazing management in particular.
Okay.
Thank you all, fantastic prezos. When you made the change on your farms, I mean obviously the revenue dropped. Did the EBIT drop as well and then recover, or was that okay from sort of the day of the change? You know what I mean? Was there a transition gap?
No, there wasn't for me, and then it improved after that.
In the last 12 years, our best 5 have been the last 5.
Even immediately after you changed?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
because all I did was I supplemented lower production with inputs that I used money for that I saved in another area. So we maintained production. So for us, it's a lot better.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
If there's no others, I'll chuck another one in. Also for Lucy, just interested in the plot sizes for the trials. They look like they're quite small plot sizes, and I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on how that might influence the results you're getting versus looking at larger areas as a whole system.
Okay, so it's a farmlet study. So we've got, on the dairy farm, we've got 3 farmlets, and the total size, Danny, help me out, is?
12.5 hectares each, and each paddock's 0.7 to 1 hectare. And then the sheep farm, the 4 farmlets are 3 hectares each, and each of the paddock sizes would be about 0.6, 0.7 hectare.
Yeah, so we've gone into our existing farm and applied these treatments, but perhaps you might be talking specifically about, say, the leaching, like when you're talking about the length of the trench for the trench lysimeters, or?
No, I was thinking about the paddock size.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, so they're typical, so, for our region anyway.
Final question here.
One last one.
Thank you. Hopefully it's not a can of worms. I'm just wondering if there's any unintended consequences, either from a market access or potentially a biosecurity point of view with some of the biological stimulants that have been mentioned. So the fish product, things like obviously chicken litter was mentioned, worm castings, etc. Might be too big a question for the time frame,
but. We have used chicken, compost, organic compost, organic certified compost. That's got to go through a pretty rigorous production process, so it's all safe. And I think the fish hydrolysate is heat treated as well. So generally, I think they're safe.
Okay, that's a good question, and more conversation can be had. Great. I just wanted to say thank you again for all of our for 4 of the farmer speakers that we've got. We've actually done case studies for them as well, so you'll find those case studies up the back at the DA stand. So for further information, go and grab one. Thank you, everyone.
Beautiful. Well, what another insightful session for what it's worth, because I'm in the Economics, Data and Insights team. I've got an answer to the number of organic farms. So if anyone's interested, just quickly, from the last National Dairy Farmers Survey, which is in 2024, clearly not a whole of industry analysis, it's a survey, we had some 3% of farms respond to say that they identified as a organic or certified organic farm, so 3% of farms nationally. And of that, it equates to 0.5 to 1% of Australian milk production. So that's 2024 data. Hopefully that's of some use. Well, again, a big round for those guys. What a fantastic insight.